All right.
Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk, streaming worldwide. Anywhere in this world, you can tune in, catch my show and all the other shows on Power Talk Live. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And as I continue along here on this journey, it's New Orleans represents this endless well of magicians. Really, there's only two letters that separate magic and music, and so much of what the musicians that I get off on do create magic on the bandstand, and oftentimes that only comes from having the foundation and the rudiments and then being able to leave the head of the tune and change maybe quadruple the time or half the time, but basically, you lose where the downbeat is and then you come back in, and there's tension and release, and there's pulse, and there's a spiritual quality to the songs, whether they are from the American Songbook or originals. And I get a chance today to speak to a cat who was not on my radar until I was doing interviews recently with Johnny Vidakovich for his upcoming The Definitive Vidakovich Files, and he mentioned that the first cat he played with was my next guest, an exemplary and phenomenal electric bass player, A.J. Dicharry. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you, Jake. Good to be on. Great to have the opportunity to be with you.
You deserve it, brother. I've been listening, like my record player just broke, so I have to wait till Hanukkah or Christmas to upgrade my stereo system. But, I'm kind of, it sucks because it was a badass system, and I love playing vinyl. And there's this one record that I've been listening to. It's a Tom Rush record on Prestige Folklore. And it's just, and I'm not a big Tom Rush guy, but it's called I Got a Mind to Ramble. And the only other instrument on it is Fritz Richmond from the Queskin Jug Band playing upright bass. I mean, I'm serious, wash tub bass.
Yeah,
playing tub. And I'm just like, and it's he does a version of Closer Walk with the whole album is burning. And it sounds to me like, that Fritz is playing with a fully tuned bass fiddle. I mean, it's like so badass. And, I've interviewed all the guys from the Jug Band, including the Fish, Barry Melton. Barry wasn't in that, but Queskin and Moldau, Richard Green, and Fritz left us. But, there was this time period of, the tub. And, I would just love to put a visual, I would love you to talk a little bit about going to sessions and hauling that tub around New Orleans.
Right.
To me, it's like the most, dude, like, listen, if I was in New York City in 1964, I would have come out of the Village Vanguard after watching Scotty LaFaro and Paul Motion and Bill Evans. And then I would have looked, and I would have been, somewhere around, one of these Vanguard recording studios or Prestige, wherever they recorded, and I'd see Fritz Richmond or Dicharry, hauling a tub to the studio, and I'm like, this is America. This is classic. This is weird, and it's cool. And I just want you to talk about basically how awesome. What were was it? Can you just please talk about lugging the tub to sessions, and what the vibe was like at that time? Because when Johnny told me that he first played with you, and you were playing tub, I lost my mind.
Well, we were kids. I mean, we didn't even have, you talk about lugging a tub around, we didn't even have a license yet. We were like 12 and 13 years old. And we had a little Dixieland band, in New Orleans, everything starts off with Dixieland,
Sure.
And so I played tub, and I actually had to get a rod with one of the mothers to each one of the jobs. I think the clarinet players mother would bring us to the job, and I'd put my tub in the back of her station wagon.
It fit in the station.
And we'd
It
go
fit
to
in the
gigs
station
like
wagon.
that.
Oh, it fit in the wagon.
Yeah, it
Oh
fit in the
my.
station wagon. You know, station wagons were big in the '60s. So, you know, so yeah, it's funny the way I got into that. You know, I was into sports all my life. I come from a sports family,
Sure.
and they all sports players. And my grandfather played violin, but most of the guys, my daddy was one of 14, and they all played sports. None of them played music, and so I was into basketball, baseball, and football. But in the 7th grade, they had this kind of nerdy guy that nobody hung with because he couldn't play basketball and everything. But I saw him play piano in 7th grade one time, and I was just amazed, you know, that he could do that. So
I love it.
You know, I told him, I said, man, I'd love to know how to. That's amazing. You can play piano like that. And he says, well, I'm amazed that you can play basketball like you play. And so we made a deal. I said, I tell you what, we'll spend the weekends together. He said, come over to my house. I'll show you how to play music, and you show me how to play basketball. So that's how I got it. So I'd go to his house. He had a little drum set. He had, you know, and he was in the band called Donks Honky Tonks, which is the band I got with Johnny Vidacovich.
Well, how do you spell that name?
And,
how do you spell that name?
Vidacovich?
No. Donks, Honky Tonks.
Donks, D-U-N-C. It stood for Duncan, D-U-N-C-A-N.
Dunk. Oh, it was an Old Man Duncan.
Yeah,
Old Man Duncan. Old Man Duncan.
Old Man Duncan. Right, exactly. He was
Holy! Wait, I want to step back for a minute. Were you?
Sure.
When you connected with Johnny, were you in the junkyard working things out with Old Man Duncan? Or
yes.
Was this, yeah. Okay. This is Okay. So
yeah.
So was the piano player in that band too?
Well, there was a pianist, and he played. Old Man Duncan played piano, but when he got the piano player, he started playing banjo in the band.
Right, and then Johnny, when he asked Johnny to sing, he'd play drums.
That's right, exactly. And Johnny would
dude,
come
the
out
Old
front.
Man Duncan band. Okay, so
Old Man.
Oh
we were
man,
all 13, 12 years old, and we all had just started playing music. And he wanted to show us how to play together in the band. He was a real Dixieland purist. Everything was 2/4. You couldn't even play 4/4 because, you know, he called it rock and roll. You know, so yeah, we'd go to his junkyard basement, which he had billions of pictures because he had all these kids playing, and he'd take pictures of them and playing. We had red and white striped shirts and a black derby and a black bow tie and a black garter on our arm. And we played for some, I'm telling you, I mean, we didn't make any money, but, I mean, playing the tub, I played for John Wayne, I played for Bob Hope, I played for the Three Stooges.
What?
I mean,
Wait. Just wait, hold on a second. Because I want to be, you were on the same bill as them, or you were playing chair? Because I know you would play Lighthouse for the blind events. You did have have gigs. I mean, they weren't a lot of money, but you had gigs.
Yes, we had gigs. We'd play. And we'd play at the airport for when they came in.
Oh, this is so. Where is the video of this? I need Dicharry and Vidacovich video of this.
Yeah, I got pictures. I don't think I have video.
Dude, so Hope would come in Hope would come in the prop plane or whatever, and he'd get out, and then Old Man Duncan's band would be cooking the groove for Bob Hope.
Exactly.
Oh
on the runway. They used to let you
on the
play
runway.
On the runway back then.
Oh
yeah,
my
so his
God,
plane
man.
would fly in.
America.
He'd get off the plane, and there was the Dixieland band of kids with one old man playing, Dixieland for him, you know. I remember what Bob Hope said. He got off the plane, and, you know, we had our red and white stripes, and he goes, guys, I know it's kind of late, but you didn't have to wear your pajamas to come here, come play for him. You know? Bob Hope never lost for words.
Dude, he always a jokester. I cannot. Dude, first of all, allowed. I mean, you were the plane was descending and ready to land, and you're like right underneath just cooking it, man. I love it.
Right where it would come to a stop, we would be playing it was on the field, on the runway. We'd be playing.
Oh my God!
And so we played for the Lighthouse for the Blind, Home for the Incurables. You know, captured audiences all over, and it was, but it was good. But yeah. that's how I got playing the tub. So
Can
that guy
I just
see
want you,
today,
I want to
that
talk to you about, this is so important with the tub, is that, I mean, one thing, I mean, I'm 42, so I was born in the 70s. I caught a little bit of that soul because basically by around 80, 81, the whole mentality had come in because of Reagan, which was, I got mine, how come you don't have yours? And, there was a
Yeah.
lot of things changed a lot. Wall Street, that movie came in, greed is good, look where we are today. I mean, it's not a coincidence.
Right.
But
Exactly.
I think more to the point, it's just that, so much of the work that you did with the tub in Old Man Duncan's band or just jamming, if you were on stage, for instance, I mean, there was no amplifiers or monitors, or the PA systems were so antiquated. So a lot of times,
Right.
you couldn't, you had to grow your ears. I mean, your ears must have been huge because you had to listen to everything because nothing was mic'd. I mean, and today
Yeah.
everything is mic'd, and there's in-house
Sure.
monitors, and the sterility of music has. I mean, all I know
Right.
is that Buddy Rich's bands, they didn't even have a mic sometimes on the upright bass player. So I kind of wanted you to talk about
Right.
how your ears grew during that time because of the lack of amplification.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about that back then is, even today, one of the things I teach is, trying to listen to the other players in the band, and try to focus on what they're doing so that you can have that pulse you were talking about in the beginning of your show with the drummer, like a bass player and a drummer. Back then, yeah, you could barely hear the tub, but if you lifted it up, with one foot, you put one foot on one edge of the tub, and when you pulled back the pole that was hooked to the tub,
The O-ring,
it
yeah,
would
the
lift it
O-ring,
up,
yeah.
and you could actually hear it. Even with the drums and the horns and everything, you could hear it. But what it forced me to do is really listen to a drummer like Johnny Vodakovich, I was fortunate enough to be in the band with him, and he was so good, and his meter for his age was so far. I mean, most of the guys didn't even know what meter was, but I learned how to have that pulse with the drummer, at that time as a kid. And I think that's where I learned most of my meter and everything is from playing the tub, just because I had to listen to the drummer.
Dude, this is
And
dude.
so
I am
many
so
guys
blessed.
today
What a blessing
are
to connect with,
soloists.
Dicharry, man. You are making my day, man. So you're talking about the meter. I'm more in. You guys weren't playing odd metered stuff, but it was like in two and the Dixieland meter is what you're talking about.
Yeah, yes. The Dixieland meter, 2 and 4. I'd be playing on 2 and 4, and just locking in with Johnny because his groove, his pulse was so dominant, and I used to think as a kid, this guy's, you can't help but play with him, which is a thing that kids struggle with today, playing with each other. They're so much into playing their own thing that sometimes they forget to try to listen to what the drummer's doing. At that time, I learned in a way of I had to listen to him. He was the pocket. You didn't have to get in the pocket. You were in the pocket when you played with Johnny because he set a strong pocket. And if you're on tub, you just, it was a lot easier to get in that pocket with him, but
Did you it's so hard for me to well, first of all, I mean, was there a way to I mean, obviously, you were getting picked up by friends' parents and chucking it in the trunk, but I mean, was there I'm envisioning a 1920s tub with those feet on it, and it weighed a lot of. How the heck did you actually pick the thing up by yourself without throwing out your back?
Yeah, well, it was a wash tub. Now it was a round wash. In the boat at the bottom, tied to a bolt in the middle of the bottom, which is upside down, so it becomes the top, and then a stick that sticks to the rim of the tub, and pulling that back and forth as it would produce different intervals of notes. And, yeah, it wasn't that heavy. It was a wash tub. Remember, it wasn't the kind of big with the big legs and everything. It was what you see today was when like when you boil crawfish, you use tubs a lot.
When you I know you because Johnny kept pivoting when he's like AJ he started with tub, but he was a tubist, but then he became this nasty electric bass player. And I remember I just interviewed this. I've done many interviews with Leland Sklar. You know who that cat is?
I don't. I know the name.
Yeah, no, he was in the section with Russ Kunkel and Danny Korchmar. He was the if you look, he was the guy who did all that early James Taylor stuff, Jackson Brown.
Oh yeah,
huge beard. He's got a huge beard, and he talked about the bass. Basically, his job is to really hold down the bottom end. And I know that sounds very colloquial, but he said, I'm really a conduit between the drums and the melodic instrumentation. So if I start to play with range, then there's a hole there, right? You're leaving a hole if you play too high. And I just wonder how you created resonance on the tub, and if the priority was if you could really have range on a wash tub bass, or were you really on the bottom end?
Yeah. Well, it was basically, I'd say 90% bottom end, but you can create range by putting more tension on the stick. That increases the high notes, and lowering the stick, goes down to the low notes. But the thing was with the tub was not as much the note intervals as it was with the pulse and the groove, and just being on that bottom end to support, just what I think I still feel is the electric bass's job in the band. To be the bottom, to be the foundation. I always like to think of it as, I guess, still my sports and my family coming out, but the offensive line of a football team, they're the ones that win the game. That's how important they are. The game's won at the line between offense and defensive line. Whoever wins that battle is going to win the game. And if you got a good bass and drum foundation in the band's going to sound good. Now, when you add all the little quarterbacks and wide receivers, which are guitar players, and all the other guys, which are just as important, but that's what makes the band sound good. But you got to start with down foundation. Look, I'm in New Orleans. Drew Brees can throw a billion passes. If he gets knocked down before he throws each one, he wouldn't have any completions. But he's leading the league because of that offensive line.
No, it's and it's amazing. I think. Well, we won't go to what happened with the Los Angeles Rams a couple years ago, but one reason I'm sorry about that, but one reason he's only won one Super Bowl is because of lack of protection. Even though he's had a good line, and you're 100% right. It's one in the trenches. So the tub is a trench warfare instrument.
Yeah,
it's really.
I really feel it is, and I
really like
feel it parallels with just what an electric bass or upright bass does. Puts the foundation in there that supports an opportunity to have a great sound in the music business, in the band. It supports that. And if you have the other instruments, you first need to start with that, though. You need to have that basic foundation of bass, drums, and then rhythm section, and your horns, and your singers, and guitar, But that's, I still feel that I learned that on bass, tub, and now on putting too much in there and losing the foundation, and creating a hole where nothing there's a void.
So you were in, Johnny was in maybe junior high in Old Man Duncan's band. How old were you?
I was 12 when I got in.
12. Were you in the union at 12 years old?
What's that?
Were you in the union at 12 years old?
No, it wasn't. We weren't union at that time. I don't think we were not in the union at that time. But I guess Old Man Duncan was. I don't know at that time if it was as strict in the '60s, in the early, in the '60s. But we played. Like I said, the airport, we'd play outside at the Lower State Theater, which is a theater on Canal Street. We'd play, Lighthouse for the Blind, Home for the Incurables. We'd play numerous jobs. So he wound up having a lot. It got to be a popular thing where he had his first band, and then he had another whole set of kids that came in and had a second band. And they called it the first band and the second band. And then it got to the point by the time I got out, he had 6 bands, 6 little Dixieland bands, all of kids, and he was the only adult in the band, was Warren Duncan of Dunk Honky Tonks. And he just put his time in and just loved watching kids. They had some great musicians that came out that band that played on tour with Wayne Cochran, with Edgar Winter,
wow.
All guys that started in Dunk Honky Tonks,
Did you, in some ways, was it interesting what's lacking today in so much music? And we talked about it. I think one reason people have a hard time having a conversation and listening on the bandstand is because, just going back to Claire Fisher and Gary Peacock or, Chuck Israels and Bill or LaFaro. Those guys were playing 3 sets a night, 6 nights a week.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And they played like 250 shows a year or more. And they were not insecure about singing for their supper or having an opportunity to play live. So it was a very democratic process, and they were able to increase musical vocabulary, and there was no pressure. But now, with younger cats, the supply and demand issue coming out of the academy, there are just not enough gigs so that when somebody gets on the bandstand, it's, using the football analogy, it's, like a Dante Culpepper kind of thing where, all of a sudden he's going to try to win the game on his own, where somebody's just like, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's become facility and chops driven because these cats don't know when the next time they're going to get actually another gig. So there's really a problem with, I wonder if you worry about, I don't want to ask you the philosophical question. What I want to get at is this idea of, so I've done a couple interviews with Harold Jones, who was Basie's drummer after Sonny Payne. And so if you really think about that band, they had Basie, they had the upright bass, they had the drums, and they had Freddie Green. So they had 4 percussive rhythm instruments. And that's one of the reasons that music is so driving, is because of the heavy rhythm. Now, people go into the academy, they want to play the guitar. Guitar has become a lead instrument. Back in the early 60s, the saxophone was still primarily the lead instrument. Guitar was a rhythm instrument. But they learned to improvise before they learned to play rhythm. And I wanted you to talk about, not just with Johnny, because, Johnny is like a painter on the drums, and he does it sort of like, it's almost just like ethereal kind of stuff. But what was it like to play with all percussive? Essentially, even when Old Man Duncan, you got banjo was keeping rhythm, piano was keeping rhythm, you were keeping rhythm, Johnny was keeping rhythm. You're just marinating in rhythm. Looking back, do you feel like you really developed your own inner time feel and good, strong rhythm because of all those rhythm instruments in the band?
Absolutely. You're spot on. And I feel that I give that credit today when I talk to guys and they ask me questions about that. I said it all goes the rhythm sections doing, first as a bass player with the drummer, and then with the other musical instruments that support that rhythm section. Piano and guitar. Back then it was piano and banjo, and Johnny on drums and me on tub. And by the way, I did that long enough on tub. I played tub for about a couple of years and saved up enough money to buy a bass, and then played bass in the band for another couple of years.
Like a Fender bass or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I got a '65 Fender Jazz.
Oh my God, dude, that's
Still
that's Chuck Rainey's. He was cooking that with Curtis with King Curtis. I mean, did you record? I mean, you were 12 years old, but did you ever get in the studio with the tub?
No, I never did have any studio. I worked in studios later on,
sure.
But not till I developed a little more of my skill on the bass. But the only thing I have from that group, believe it or not, his name was Warren Duncan, and I met a guy at church, and his name was Warren Duncan, and I'd always thought, that's funny. He's got the same name as the old man. Well, I find out, we became friends and everything, and I one day told him about my experience. I said, I used to play in a little band, and the leader of the band was Warren Duncan. He said, that's my grandfather.
Oh.
And I said, you're kidding me. He's been deceased now. He says, I got all the pictures that were on the wall. So he has at his house all these photographs from the 50s and 60s and 70s of Dunk's honky tonks. And I got to go over there and check them out. And it's really, I got a lot of pictures. But no, to answer your question, no studio work from Dunk's recordings or anything.
I need a couple of photos of the airport hangar. I mean, that to me is just beyond legendary. I wanted to ask you about this, and just because it's really my sort of pocket of time. I don't think there was no bad music recorded from the late 60s through the early 70s. I don't care what genre it was. It was like the ultimate class of humanity. The bean counters were making money. They let the musicians create the music. Not everything, but the idea of amplification. I want to read this. This is from one of my interviews with Johnny, and then I want you to riff on it in your experience. He said,
okay,
this is going like 67, 68 area. He goes, I noticed the music was getting very loud immediately. When I was a young teenager, amplifiers started to become more common. The electric bass was in its early childhood, and the electric piano was just getting popular. I noticed I had to play louder, and I was embracing the louder volume because that was part of my generation's movement. By the time I jumped the fence to go see the Beatles, they were playing with Vox amplifiers. My boys went from playing Ampeg B15s and B18s,
which I had.
Right, no, that's what I want you to riff on. And Fender Deluxe Twin to 2 or 3 big Vox amplifiers. At first, the guys used to put a microphone near the electric piano, and finally someone figured out they could run it through a little amp. I enhanced all of that. Right. It meant that I could play a little louder, and I enjoyed that. I was a kid having fun. I had sores on my hands from playing with big sticks and no monitors. Mm-hmm. I played with a bass player when I was 17 years old, and this cat went from using a small amp the size of a suitcase to 3 custom amplifiers that looked like refrigerators. I was playing next to him with no mics on the drums. The guitar player is playing through a Marshall and it's buzzing, and the organ player is playing a Farfisa through a basement amp and a Leslie speaker. I did have Band-Aids and sores and blisters on my hands. I bitched a little bit, but then I'd tape up and play. I mean, can you talk about that time, AJ, where, I remember Bucky Pizzarelli, I did an interview with him before, rest in peace, and he talked about he actually created the bass guitar, which had 7 strings, which one of the strings was a bass string, so that it was like a component of early studio music in the 50s, jingles, commercials, this kind of stuff. But when the electric bass really came in, and before you had more before you had sophisticated PA systems. Can you talk about the evolution of your amplification on stage, going from essentially in Warren's band to for no amplification with the tub to an electric bass, playing live shows, and because I mean there's a big difference between what you hear on stage and then you go out to the middle of the audience and sometimes you can't hear anything, and I just wonder how your evolution in terms of amplification as the music got sonically louder, but yet the technology had not yet advanced to state-of-the-art surround sound systems.
Yeah. So, I grew up in the same era as Johnny, and actually we were about the same age. And, I remember we, in that band, had no amplification, maybe just one little PA for the singer. Everybody else was not mic'd,
I love it.
And then the next band I get in, I think everything went through the PA. I mean, they had one little amplifier. The guitar went through that. I had my own bass amp, which was a little B18 amp peg. They had a B15 and a B18. The 18 had a 18-inch speaker, and actually the 15 had a 15-inch tube amp. And I used to have to keep it real low because everything else was going through the PA, which was the voices and the guitar and the keyboard, So it started out where, I mean, it's amazing some of the things that we used to play through in halls that were fairly big, but we didn't have to be that loud. But I think as the electronics advanced, and I'm almost scared to use the word advanced because I mean, there is a point where you could get a clearer sound from all instruments, which was good, but I think it got taken advantage of. And rather than just amplifying what you're doing, I think the amplifiers had gotten to be more important than what you're playing. And the sound just got, like you said, these refrigerator amplifiers, and it was all about just how loud and how, crazy you can make the sound. And I think you were losing in some instances in the late 70s and stuff like that, some of that sound that quality sound for just a thing coming out of amplifiers, And so I think, it bridged into some crazy stuff,
No, I want to be clear though. Are you saying that because of the technology kind of superseded the human output, and as a result, people started to get off on actual noise instead of sound? It became noise. You couldn't. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't even hear it. I mean, after a while, and then now to the point now where my favorite groups, improvisational groups that I go to see, some people are hung up with that they need in-ear monitors because they can't even hear what they're playing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was an issue.
Yeah.
The reason you played low with the B18 was so that you wouldn't overshadow the vocals and the other things like that, but that you could hear what you were playing, right? I mean, it was very
right.
And that's the point. It's gone from basically sound to noise.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's where people take advantage of things. It's always like that in the world. In other words, you get something that improves music to a point because of the quality coming from these amplifiers are good, and then it bridges a thing where, well, wait a minute, if I can just focus on the amp, I don't even have to play that good. I'll just make this noise, like you said, and that'll sell records, and that's where it became, not a good thing. It got the amplifiers were taking advantage of the music, the quality of music, and the amplifiers became the bigger thing than the quality of playing and the quality of music. And but there always was that red thread of redemption that always
listen to your poetry
through music. Yeah. I mean, through all music, but I was just answering the question, the effects that amplifiers have.
Sure.
and it had good effects and it had bad effects, and but there still was always great musicians willing to know that these amps are just to enhance. I think it had its pros and cons.
Did you? It's just so funny. There was a great bass player, Putter Smith, still cranking, an upright player, and he. One night, Woody Herman's band was in L.A., probably 74 range, and he gets a call. Bass player was sick. Can you come sub? And he runs down with his upright, and Woody looks at him. He's like, "Why'd you bring that piece of shit?" And basically, it was so en vogue to play acoustic at that time that even sort of the original masters of the music were totally ensconced with electric bass. And there were guys like I've done 2 interviews with the great Steve Swallow, and he was at a NAMM show with Burton, and he actually was. This is a precursor to the NAMM show in the late '60s, and he was walking around, and he actually, when he saw the booths for the electric bass, he almost looked at it as like smut houses and brothels. He couldn't go in there. He thought it was dirty because he was such an acoustic cat. And then he went in there, and he put his hands on this electric bass, and it was love. It was a rational love, and he never put it away. And he spent a lot of his career trying to incorporate and advocate for the electric bass in jazz. I just wonder, you never really fiddled around with the bass, with the upright bass.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And I love it. I love an upright bass, and I think it's got a purer sound than the electric bass. I love the the upright bass, and it just happened to be the genre of music that I play in New Orleans as through the late '60s and into the '70s and everything. Required more of an electric bass. I was doing a lot of cover bands back then, and that covered Chicago and Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Motown. All the Motown guys. And that's what I was playing. So I got away from playing the upright because I didn't see, even though in New Orleans, Dixieland's still big, and but I just never got into the Dixieland scene anymore, and kind of did cover bands like that, and and cover bands that had originals out and stuff, but I just never had the opportunity to work with my upright too much, so I really just played my electric, and I got a 65. I bought a 65 Fender Jazz in 1965. I went there to buy a Vox bass like the Beatles, just because they had just come out in '63, and I wanted to have one like Paul McCartney, Hoffman, and I went there, and the guy said, "That's a good bass, but if you buy this Fender Jazz, you'll have it the rest of your life." So I still have it.
It's so funky. I mean, this is what I wanted to read this to you. This is this is from my first interview with George Porter. He said, one of the things I think I do really well is couple with drummers. I really listen to what they're doing. I try to be as close to one with the bass drum as possible. I stay away from the snare drum. So when there's a backbeat, I try very hard not to have a note that's going to be on top of the backbeat. There was a period of old recordings where bass drums were not very prevalent in the music. It was mostly the top end of the drum kit. It wasn't until the 70s when bass drums got into the mix, or when they started remastering some of those old sessions. The drum kit got to be a little bit more fuller. I remember as a kid hearing the top end of the drums more than I heard the bottom end. I think I got the idea to be closely related to the kick drum and leaving the snare drum alone through my session work with Alan Toussaint. It was a strict rule. It was a strict rule that you don't put a note where the snare drum is. In the jazz community, the backbeat wasn't that necessary in the music because the snare drums we're playing kind of free kinds of things on top of secondary melodies, on top of the swing thing. So he's talking about. I want to ask you. He goes. It was a strict rule with Toussaint. You don't put a note where the snare drum is. Do you know what he's talking about? I mean, to me, that's the beautiful. It was also a situation of you're playing Motown and stuff, and the bass lines with Jamerson oftentimes played counterpoint to the vocals, and it just there's something in modern rhythm sections today where I feel like that whole values of Toussaint have just sort of been washed away. I don't hear that kind of groove anymore, and I wanted you just you can riff on it any way you want. Is that something that you try to do too? Is stay away from the snare drum, so you're not going to be putting a beat with the backbeat.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, I would. The only thing I disagree with is that it's not prevalent today. Today in New Orleans, it's prevalent. That is still what makes New Orleans music.
That's
New Orleans music.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I mean that. Yeah, it's that bass and bass drum and a snare is almost like an answer to what the bass and bass drum is doing. It's like boom, 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 pop. Boom, 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 bop. It's like that's an answer to each other, and the bass and the bass drum, but is doing that. Now, a lot of the music today, though, in not New Orleans music, but a lot of the music grooves today are bass playing like eighth notes all the time, like
exactly, dude.
So he's playing bass, drum, and snare. And it's not an answer thing, but I totally agree with George Porter where, I still lock into what a bass drum's doing. I mean, whether I'm playing a swing beat, a straight ahead jazz beat or whatever, I'm always playing with the bass drum, and locking in with that and that pulse and that groove and letting that snare drum just answer to enhance what the bass and the bass drum is doing. But that's New Orleans.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's everywhere.
Well, I mean, you look at Toussaint, the amount of hit records that came out of C-Saint Studios. Bernard Purdy said the same thing. He goes,
yeah,
none of the major iconic hits that he played on, all of them that he played on had dynamics. And I wonder if you could articulate what you just said there, which instead of the call and response between the drum and the bass, why we got to this point where there's just an excessive amount of language between the bass player and the drummer, and therefore there's no space in the music, so the music can't breathe. And we all know that the silence is the music. Is it just was it Gloria Gaynor and disco? Was it the drum machine? Was it just? I mean, all I hear today, AJ, is just. And I don't listen to a lot of pop music because I'm just ensconced in this other period of music.
Right.
But the issue I have today, especially with something, whatever they call jazz, is this homogenization of sound, and part of it is because the roles of the rhythm section have become so. There's just too much language. Before, I don't care if it was Wilbur Ware or Jimmy Garrison or Chuck Beatty. I mean, those guys, they could play one note. It was so round that it was like it would just leave you like floored. And it was so, and people can't feel that anymore. I don't know why they can't feel that. I mean, where do you come down? I know you're in New Orleans. It's a little bit different because you're like probably the last regional hotbed of music with a regional sound. But in your mind, how did we get so? Because Jamerson was doing what you were talking about, and he was in Motown.
Yeah.
And all those cats, all those guys were doing that. So, how did we move away from call and response to no space in the rhythm section?
Yeah, I think it's all the self-motivated things. I always try to, when I'm playing with a lot of younger guys, they don't know about space. Maybe they listen into these national records that have, like you said, continual vocalization of instruments, a constant thing, and no space, and they don't see that. So when I show them, let me show you what space does. It's
Yeah.
not,
Oh man.
and I kind of teach the younger kids that, and they get it. I mean, they start to go, oh yeah, that felt so good. Rather than everybody playing, da, 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 everybody playing. When you said, I mean, space today, but I think people's getting away from it because I think it's a lack on our generation who's played that and just grew up with it, and it became natural for us because that's what the music was. But you can still incorporate it in today's music, and it becomes tasteful all of a sudden. It becomes what I call music, when you put
Exactly.
space
That's
and
it.
when you put dynamics and, rather than just straight ahead, everybody screaming at each other, if you want to put it in the vocabulary vernacular, I mean, everybody's talking at the same time and nobody's listening and everybody's hollering, so I think it's a downfall of maybe uh, people my age that don't take the time, like a Warren Duncan from Dunk's Honky Tonks, to kind of teach us what he taught us, and for us to bring that same thing to them. It's not a harder thing. You know, the good thing about it is it's not harder to leave space and use dynamics. It's not something like, oh man, I really gotta get my chops together to do that. It's something everybody can do at whatever level, and then they can incorporate, their practice where it fits in,
And
and
I go back to this whole idea of, basically, not having experiential learning on the bandstand. And then, I mean, basically, you know, you went to the Schillinger School in before it became Berkeley, and like Charlie
mhm,
Mariano. That was a place for already established professional musicians to go and get off the
mhm,
road because the road can eat you alive or learn a new instrument. But you
right,
were already considered a professional musician, and now you have cats going to North Texas, and at the time there were only like two
mhm,
schools that had jazz programs, and you were basically making up the rules in some ways, which was so cool. But
mhm,
um, now cats are going in, paying, maybe on a scholarship, but for the most part paying huge amounts of money to go into a school to basically come at, and they're saturated with visual information. So they're comping people how they're playing as opposed to what they're hearing. I mean, you guys maybe had the opportunity to play records. You didn't have a rewind button on the radio, so you'd hear something and then kind of have to extrapolate off of that. But the major question is,
mhm,
AJ, setting yourself aside because you're an established, known entity, you have your niche, you have your gigs, and you've been a professional musician your whole life. I just wonder if our society, and I'm not talking about New Orleans, but I am because
mhm.
does our society still view a musician as a profession, or is music a musician's gift to the world?
Wow, what a great question that is. I don't know if I have the answer to that. With the,
No, what I'm saying, let me just tell you again, because you can think about it, but like Dizzy and Miles, like I mean, those guys never.
right.
They didn't weren't millionaires in their time. They probably should have been, but I mean, Dizzy was respected for his genius. Though, and I'm not saying there wasn't
Mhm,
scumbag stuff that went on and people didn't get ripped off, and there were plenty of geniuses that died broke, but they were paid. It was being a musician was considered a viable profession, and now it's like, oh, you can, and I'm talking about even for startup bands. I mean, I hosted a Woodstock anniversary, 50th anniversary in San Francisco last year with Michael Shreve and Greg Arico, who were the drummers from
mhm,
Santana and Sly Stone.
mhm,
And I mean,
right.
Santana didn't have one record out when they went to Woodstock. I mean,
Wow.
that's unheard of in today's society
Yeah,
that you'd have a
right.
festival and you'd invite a band with no product. But yet they did that,
Right.
and Latin rock, for the most part, I mean, we knew what Latin jazz was, but Latin rock was kind of born because of that. So it's a whole different paradigm. But again, I go back to this idea of when you talk to your students, do you let them know that that what they need to sort their mindset that they need to have if they are really intent on choosing this for a career?
Mm-hmm.
You still with me?
Jake?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah, what up?
no, we just had we had a little drop in the Skype there.
Okay.
I mean, do you let I mean, maybe the better question is this: even if you wound up, because there have been plenty of geniuses that died broke. Do
Mm-hmm.
you believe the music chose you?
I believe it's a gift that that I have that other musicians have. I do believe it's a gift, and I think in that sense it chose me, you know. But do I think that someone without a gift can practice hard enough and learn and become a an established musician? I believe that's the case. I believe they can. I don't know. Like I said, it's a hard question to answer, but I don't know that they could achieve what someone who is born with a gift has. Even though I think they can achieve a lot through hard practice and dedication and listening and applying themselves. But without the gift, I don't know if they could achieve. And again, I mean, you could turn that around and say a person that was born with the gift with no dedication and no, um, um, stabilization and no practice and you know, would maybe not be as advanced as that person because of their lack of unresponsibility in with their gift. I mean, if you're born with the gift to build a house, but you never build a house, your gifts, not going to, you know,
Materialize. Yeah,
solidify
no,
itself,
I just
right?
absolutely.
Materialize.
But I mean, But I mean, one thing about Johnny that in writing this book, it's. I mean, yeah, he made a few albums as a leader, and he certainly played on a bunch of records. But he tried his hand in Los Angeles and
Hmm.
New York, and he was never considered a studio shark by any means.
Hmm.
And he's made a career as well, he's seen the world, but for the most part, a live musician in the Big
Hmm.
Easy. And I think you did that too. But AJ, you know this better than
Hmm.
anybody. I mean, I believe that, and I'm just talking about like jazz gigs, kind of just like, like the pay for musicians, and I'm not talking about Journey and Steve Miller and people that go out on, you know, summer tours and gross millions of dollars. But the average wage of a musician has not gone up since 1984, and yet
Hmm.
the cost of living is insane. So,
Yeah.
I mean, are there different avenues for cats today? Because I mean, the days of three sets a night, 6 sets a night, six
Hmm.
nights a week, they're gone.
Right.
I mean, and
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, you had the gift, but I can't. I know you can't look into a crystal ball, but I'm just saying that. Um, was there a point when, you know, you did you knew, even though it wasn't logical and it wasn't in the thinking mind as it related to music, and everyone was saying, "What the heck? You're crazy, man! Why don't you just take this simpler path? Why don't you go into construction? Why don't you go and get a steady job? How are you going to raise a family?" And you're like, "This is all I know how to do." Was there a defining moment
Hmm.
for you in your career when you realized that not just that the music chose you, but that it was the only thing that you knew how to do?
Yeah. Um, it's all I've done my whole life. But when I had 4 kids, I have 4 kids, and when they were all in school that I had to pay for, and
Yeah,
a club owner
yeah.
would say, you know what? I don't think we're going to use y'all next week. And I said, wait, I got 4 tuitions to pay for school. What do you mean you can't? You're not using me. You got to use me,
You got, dude, you
But
got.
I
I
mean,
need to
I
pay the tuition.
realized
Yeah.
that, right, exactly. So for a little while, I got into sales of a printing company, just to enhance
Absolutely.
my pay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I had to do something else, even though I always played music for a living, and uh, and in just like in any business, I think you are gonna struggle and have to pay dues and stuff like that. But I think that it's all worth it in the end because not what you get money wise, but what it does for your heart when it's accepted, and that is why I think there's more musicians today here in New Orleans. I can speak for the New Orleans musicians that don't have the stress that these guys that got into the construction and stuff like that, because there's not as much reward in those other things as there are when you're fulfilling your gift as a musician, and you get to do that for an audience that appreciates it, and that's why musicians live longer.
No, I think you're. Well, I mean, listen. I don't know if you're familiar with the term descarga, which is a spiritual discharge. Mongo used to play. The word was co-opted by the Spanish. It was called Santeria, but it was actually more African polytheistic religious drumming um,
Hmm.
sessions, and he would. I mean, literally, it's a spiritual discharge coming out of your brain. So when I go see Torque and Johnny and
Hmm.
Singleton or Porter or any of these cats, I'm like
Yeah.
I could go in and feel dis-ease and walk out of the
Hmm.
gig and be completely healed for days. Days.
Well, yeah,
Now,
exactly.
but AJ, and again, I mean, I just don't want to be Pollyannish here, man. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
it's. I agree with you. It's ditch diggers and construction workers. I tip my cap to them because it's hard ass work. It's also
Hmm.
stable work, and
Yeah.
I guess I did an interview with Al Di Meola a couple of years ago, and this is you know way before the. I mean, this is not way before the insanity began, but he said, listen, um, uh, copyright or publication of music is gone. You can't make money off right. The days of of Dylan or Joni Mitchell going into the Topanga Canyon and writing an album and selling 1 million copies and then going on tour and writing it off as a loss. Those days are gone. The only way you can make money as a musician in today's world is by road dogging it or playing live gigs. And
Hmm.
that's all gone, man. It's not happening,
Yeah.
man. And I mean, and
Yeah.
I wonder. Johnny thinks, and I don't. I can tell you what he thinks, but I'm really, you know, he just thinks. I mean, it was already pretty effed up to begin with, as far as
Hmm.
the amount. You go to a packed venue, you're like, oh, these guys are probably making some bread, and actually, when it's all said and done, they're not really making that much. And that goes across the board for any genre of music, and and what is it? Johnny thinks it's going to be even more dog eat dog once we get out on the other side. That yes, in fact, the the pop stars or the people that already have a lot of street cred and they're already a known name. They're going to be subsidized or paid very well, but the more unsung cats or the bands that are really road dogging it are going to be scuffling and clawing over the scraps and getting out. I know you've been ensconced completely in New Orleans for the most part, but all the independent music venues that exist that remain in certain cities, I don't even know how many of them are going to survive. I mean, in your mind, what what gives you hope about the future of live music? Because that's kind of outside of lessons and teaching. It's the only way you can make money in music today.
Yeah. Well, you know, um, you talking about as far as after this COVID thing's over,
Yeah,
right?
because I mean, construction workers are working right now, but musicians are not.
Right.
You know.
Musicians are not right. Well, um, yeah, it's hard to predict the future, but I tell you, I'm working with Louis Primmett Jr. now,
Ah.
and when we play on the road, we have packed houses, and he's got a 10-piece group that comes from all over the country. I mean, we got 3 guys in L.A., we got 2 in New York, I mean, just all over. In Phoenix, he's got a couple rated a crowd where when we play in theaters that's pretty much sold out, and so I think it's still there. Now we haven't naturally everything for the whole summer got canceled because it's COVID. So no, I wasn't able to work with him, but when up until then for the last 3 years, that's who I've been playing with, and it's a 10-piece group, but and he'll do a week at a time, a week in New York, and then we'll come back home, and another month he'll do a week over here, and people are responding to good music today. I think I'm very hopeful that it's going to return to that. Now, like I said, I haven't worked the job since this started, but I think it's going to. I'm just. No one can predict the future, but I think it's going to come to an end, this COVID thing, and I think we'll be back on track. Now, I think the musicians are the last ones that's going to be back. Like you said, there's people working construction and there's restaurants starting to open, but not nowhere for musicians to play.
Well, it's also just, I mean, like you look at the realities of it. I mean, the idea that, just like a place like Snug Harbor, even if they started to have music there again, how many people could they actually put in there? They'd have to put in half or less the people. So you're talking about less money overall. And I guess here's the other thing, AJ. And I'm really not trying to be a wet blanket. I'm just trying to talk to somebody who's been on this earth longer than I have. It's just, it's like Rick Laird. I don't know if he was the original electric bass player in the original Mahavishnu Orchestra with McLaughlin. Mm-hmm. And just a phenomenal dude. And I've done 2 interviews with him this year. He said, he goes, how in the hell was it, this is why I know what you're saying, like you have confidence that things will return. And one reason I'm just skeptical is that a decision was made by our government that said, okay, who gets $600 a week of unemployment during COVID? Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. And that means, these jobs, these are jobs that people have lost because of COVID, and they deserve that $600. And you know who got left out? You, the musicians. Mm. Nobody got the unemployment. So that means in this administration, and the way our society's leaning at the legislative level, is that a musician is not seen as a job. And it's as long as I am on the air, and I've been on the air 10 years, I've done 2,000 interviews, published 2 books, and I'm getting a chance to crank away with you today. I will never stop until the arts are fully subsidized in our country. And it's just, to me, it's really evident you don't have to be a rocket scientist. If musicians were left out of the unemployment, it means they aren't considered. It's not the late great Charlie. The late great Charlie Persip, the great big band drummer with Dizzy. He just passed away last week. He said, we used to get so. He goes, I don't know where they came up with this idea of playing music. He's like, we're not playing, man. We're not playing. We're working our asses off, and it's and look where we're at culturally. In our society is a direct reflection of the music, even in the hardest times, in the Vietnam War and all these other times. The music got people through because it was human music, and it was still considered a viable profession. you're hooked into, and you know, there are ways to get to do it. I will ask you, you know, I know he's paying the bills he was paying the bills. He was helping you bring money in the last 3 years, but how would you say the gig with Louis Prima Jr. is a formula trip gig, or do you never play the same song the same way once?
We switch up the songs, but no, it's more formula. It's good music, and it's really good. But the sets that we play are normally the same sets because we all live all over the country, so we don't have a lot of time to do some improvisation on that. But we jump into some. The guys jump into some solos and.
How do you get off on? Because you know, I'm just from the school of Lee Morgan and Miles, where it's like, if I'm paying to go see music, I want the musicians to look at the audience and non-verbally say, "You may not dig what we're doing, but we dig what we're doing, and we hope you dig what we're doing." And even if you don't, we're still going to play it. And you know what? It's this idea, and I know that's more of a jazz concept where you never play the same song the same way once.
Right.
But I do want you to talk to younger, because there are cats that are on. I mean, Tower of Power is in the same boat as the Prima Junior band, where you know, where Tower originally. I mean, that's a whole other topic that we'll have to get into at a later time. But you know, the music came out of the communities. Tower of Power came out of Oakland, right? I mean, the meters came out. Everything came out of the communities. But now you got the guitar player in Towers in Utah, and this guy's in this and this and that. So, but for people that are fortunate enough when COVID, if it does ever come to an end, we get back on the bandstand. How do you get off on playing a formula gig when it becomes? To me, it can become antiseptic. It's great to be paid, but as a creator, how do you still stay focused and enjoy the process?
Yeah, well, we only do like an hour and 15-minute show per night. You know, that's what we do, and you know, there's a concept of even playing that song multiple times in a week, say, you can improve on that song. And we try to reach a limit each time of the most highest quality of music that we can put out. And then the next night, if we're playing that same song, we want to reach another level of quality, even on that same song, where the drummer and I will talk after each job about how much better it was than the night before, or you know, or we were a little bit not locked in as much on this as we were last night, and discuss those things, and just the music improves and you know, with dynamics and all that stuff we talked about, space and stuff, but it's not the exact notes every night. I mean, it's the exact songs, but we play them a little different each time, and you know, I think we reach a quality. We always reaching for that quality that you know is just right there, and always reaching for it, but never quite achieving it. You know,
but also it's not. There's not a impetus, and I understand that it's the time that we're living in, but there's not an impetus. It's more about taking the music, playing the parts at a higher level, but you're really just, it's about proficiency of the parts. It's not about potentially growing the musical vocabulary, because, I mean, sometimes, there are no wrong notes. So sometimes, like, a flub or a clam can lead to a gateway of new musical vocabulary, and this was not unheard of at one time. But there's an adherence, especially among younger cats, an adherence to playing, especially if you're in a cover band, the adherence to playing something exactly the way it sounds on the album, and that is how people get off on this stuff. And to me, it's like, well, what do you have to say for yourself? I mean, and it's to me, to me, it's like, great. You want to play an hour and 15 to a packed house? I'd like another hour late night jam session with Dicharry and the drummer just playing in a power trio. I mean, I know. Listen, there's plenty of cats, including Vidakovich and other people that are doing that. It's just not enough. Yeah. It's not enough. And before we're gonna have to do part 2, AJ. But I wanted to ask you before I let you go. Are there any other tub players around that were your peers or people that you looked? I'm just trying to get to every remaining tub player left.
Right. Well, believe it or not, there's a tub player that plays with Louis Prima's.
No way.
And a washboard player and a few people like that.
That is. Wait, you're talking about washboard? Washboard Willie was out of Detroit. There's a tub player and you in the band?
No, I'm not. Yeah, 2 tub players in the Louis Prima band, but neither one of us are playing tub at the time.
Wait a minute. Oh, wait, hold on. So you're playing electric. What's he playing?
He's playing trombone.
Okay, so what's this cat's name?
Okay, his name's Phil Clevenger.
Oh my God! And, can you connect me with this guy, man? I need to talk to this guy immediately.
Sure, I'll give you some information. Yeah. I'll share his contact with you. And his band at home that he plays with now, they again with the COVID, they're not playing. They got like a little 4 or 5 piece group that plays, and he plays sometimes tub in that band. Yep, wash tub. Yep, he does. So,
Dicharry, I mean, let's let this breathe for a minute, but let's do part 2. We got a lot more to get to. I mean, it is such. I hope that. I mean, when Johnny told me about you, he's just always dropped Luther Kent. He's dropping all these names. The guy used to work for him and Singleton were working this mafia club, and then they left stupidly. I mean, the whole thing is just like it's so insanely classic. And then he's talking about you're going to be in the book, man. I'm so hot. It's such an honor to connect with you, man. You have anything?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, I mean, just before I let you go, do you? Can you talk about what Johnny's meant to you and just in your life?
Oh, just everything, man. I mean, Johnny was the guy that taught me my roots. I mean, I've always seemed like I played in bands that the drummer was better than me, and it helped not playing out a lot to play with the drummer. And to start out playing with a drummer like Johnny Vidakovich, I mean, I feel like I've had a head start on everybody else. I mean, the guy's phenomenal. He still is too. He's one of my favorites.
A painter, man. You guys are painting, man.
Yeah,
it's freaking great. All right, Dicharry. Yeah, listen, man. Much love to you. I'll get you. Are you? So you get texts on this phone? Because I want to send you
yes.
Do me. Yeah, I'm going to send you a copy of this interview later, so you have it for your records.
Great.
But
I appreciate.
Yeah, and
that.
get me any other tub players you know about. I'd love to talk to them.
I'll share Phil's information with you.
All right, much love to you, AJ, man. Be safe.
Thank you, Jay.
All right, bro.
Okay, man. Thank you.
Be cool, man.
All right.
Later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Johnny Vidakovich, for hooking that up. And we'll be back later today with Aaron Spursky. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk.